Millionaire comes home early and can't believe what he sees. Alexander Hayes was one of the most powerful and wealthy men in America. At 45, he had built an entire technology empire, owning skyscrapers in New York and multiple projects spread across the globe. People often called him the cold billionaire. He avoided lavish parties, shunned interviews, and buried himself in endless numbers. Success had made him untouchable, but also utterly alone. Yet behind all the glory lay a life filled with emptiness. His wife, Amelia, had passed away 3 years earlier after a sudden illness. Since then, the vast mansion in the Upper East Side echoed only with Alexander's heavy footsteps, and occasionally the bright little voice of his 5-year-old son, Ethan. Ethan was the only hope Alexander had left, but fate had played a cruel trick. The boy was born with fragile legs and relied on crutches to move around. Alexander loved his son, but he never knew how to show it. The grief of losing his wife and the endless pressure of running a global company drove him to bury himself in work instead of spending time with Ethan. Day after day, he left the house at dawn and returned well past 9 at night, when the boy was already fast asleep. For Alexander, it was the only way to escape the unbearable loss he couldn't face. Inside the magnificent mansion, Ethan grew up surrounded by nurses, tutors, and a handful of household staff. Among them was a quiet but patient face, Sophia Ramirez. The young 28-year-old woman had been hired to help with the household chores and to take care of Ethan when needed. With her long hair tied back and her warm, gentle eyes, Sophia didn't stand out amidst the grandeur of the home, yet she was the only one who truly listened to every word Ethan whispered. Alexander hardly paid attention to Sophia. To him, she was just another employee among the many working in his household. But on one autumn evening, when a corporate meeting ended earlier than expected, Alexander decided to return home without notifying anyone. That single decision would open the greatest turning point of his life. When the grand doors of the estate opened, Alexander froze, stunned by the sight before him. In the middle of the living room, Sophia Ramirez was kneeling on the floor, scrubbing with a rag in her hand. But that was not what left him speechless. Beside her, Ethan, his 4-year-old son, was wobbling on his tiny purple crutches, holding a cleaning cloth, trying to help. "Tia Sophia, I can clean this spot," the blond boy said, his voice trembling with effort. "All right, Ethan, you've helped enough for today. Go sit on the sofa and rest. Let Tia Sophia finish," Sophia replied gently. "But I want to help. Tia always says we're a team," Ethan insisted, struggling to keep his balance, his blue eyes shining with determination. Alexander stood frozen, unable to breathe. His chest tightened with emotions he could not name. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen Ethan smile with such unguarded joy. "Very well then, my little assistant, but just a little longer," Sophia conceded. At that moment, Ethan noticed his father standing at the door. His face lit up with a mixture of surprise and worry. "Dad, you're home early!" he exclaimed, nearly losing his balance as he turned too quickly. Sophia jumped to her feet in alarm, dropping the rag. She nervously wiped her hands on her apron and bowed slightly. "Good evening, Mr. Hayes. I didn't know you'd be home so soon. I was just finishing up the cleaning." Alexander still couldn't gather his thoughts. He looked at his son, then at Sophia, who seemed as though she wanted to vanish from the room. "Ethan, what are you doing?" "I was helping Tia Sophia." "Look, Dad," Ethan said proudly. "Today I stood all by myself for almost 5 minutes." Alexander turned to Sophia. She lowered her head, her hands tightening. 5 minutes? Alexander repeated in disbelief. Ethan explained excitedly. "Tia Sophia makes me practice every day. She says if I keep trying, one day I'll run like the other kids." The room fell into heavy silence. Alexander felt both unsettled and deeply moved. He demanded, "Practice?" Sophia raised her head, her brown eyes filled with fear. "Sir, I was only playing with the boy. I didn't mean to overstep. Ethan quickly interrupted, trying to stand between his father and her. Dad, Tia Sophia is amazing. She never leaves me when I cry from the pain. She says I'm strong like a warrior. Alexander felt his chest tighten. How long had it been since he'd spoken to his son for more than 5 minutes? He swallowed hard and said, Ethan, go upstairs to your room. I need to speak with Tia Sophia. But Dad, Ethan, listen. The boy looked at Sophia. She gave him a reassuring smile, signaling everything was fine. With clattering crutches, Ethan climbed the stairs. Just before disappearing, he shouted, Tia Sophia is the best person in the world. Alexander and Sophia were left alone in the room. He walked toward her slowly. For the first time, he noticed her reddened hands from scrubbing the floor and the damp fabric of her trousers at the knees. How long have you been practicing with Ethan? About 6 months, sir, but I always use my lunch break or finish my duties first. I never neglect my work. You're not being paid extra. Yes, sir. I never expected anything. I just enjoy spending time with the boy. Alexander was speechless. He asked quietly, Why do you say he's special? Sophia smiled softly. Because he never gives up, even when it hurts. Because he has such a big heart and always worries about others. Ethan is truly wonderful. Her words cut into Alexander's heart like a blade. He had never once looked at his son with such eyes. Those words cut into Alexander's heart like a knife. He had never looked at his son that way before. Alexander tried to keep his voice calm. Where did you learn to do these exercises? Sophia lowered her head, hesitating. I have some experience, sir. What kind of experience? Alexander pressed. She remained silent for quite a while before finally confessing, My younger brother, Carlos, was born with weak legs. I spent my entire childhood taking him to physical therapy, learning exercises to help him walk. When I saw Ethan feeling so sad, I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Forgive me, sir, but the boy, he is very lonely, and you are always consumed by work. Alexander was speechless. Sophia lowered her face, her voice growing faint. If you wish, I'll stop right away. I only wanted the boy to smile more. A child should be able to laugh every day. Alexander froze. He suddenly realized he couldn't even remember the last time he had seen Ethan truly smile. Sophia, may I ask you something personal? Yes, of course, sir. Why are you working as a housekeeper? Clearly you have knowledge of therapy and are very good with children. Why not work in healthcare? Sophia gave a faint, sad smile. Because I have no degree, sir. Everything I know, I learned from caring for my younger brother. None of it holds any official value. But I have to work to support my family, my mother, and my brother Carlos. He's only 16, goes to school in the mornings, and helps at the shop in the afternoons. My mother works night shifts cleaning offices. We just scrape by. Alexander felt a mix of shame and admiration. In front of him stood a 28-year-old woman, worn down by the weight of her family's needs, and yet she still found the time and tenderness to give to his son. Have you never thought of studying to become a licensed therapist? Sophia smiled again, but her smile was tinged with bitterness. Study for what, sir? Where would I find the money, the time? I leave home at 6 in the morning, take 2 buses to get here, work until 6 in the evening, then 2 more buses home by 8. I help my brother with his studies, prepare dinner. I go to bed close to midnight. On weekends, I clean other houses for extra money. Where would I find the time to study? Alexander was silent, listening to every word, realizing he had never known anything about her life beyond the 8 hours she spent inside the estate. Sophia, I want to see the exercises you've been doing with Ethan. She hesitated. But the boy is already in his pajamas. We usually practice in the mornings before his online classes. I arrive at 7:30, prepare breakfast. While the rest of the house is still asleep, Ethan and I go out to the garden to train. Afterwards, he showers, eats breakfast, and begins class. Alexander was stunned. He hadn't the slightest idea about his son's morning routine. He always left home by 7 and returned only after 9 at night. Even weekends were buried in work. Does Ethan enjoy these exercises? He loves them. At first it was difficult and painful, but now he asks for them himself. Just yesterday, he stood for nearly 3 minutes without crutches. Alexander's eyes widened. The physical therapist had said such progress would take many more months. Sophia blushed slightly. Maybe Ethan has extra motivation. He wants to impress me. And, she hesitated, he wants to impress you too. Alexander's throat tightened. He had no idea his son thought of him that way. At that moment, the soft tapping of crutches echoed on the stairs. Ethan appeared, whispering, "Dad, you're still here?" "You should be asleep," Alexander said, his tone no longer stern. "I couldn't sleep. You're not going to send Tia Sophia away, are you?" Alexander froze. "Why would you think that?" "Because earlier you looked so serious when you told me to go upstairs. Mom always sent the maids away whenever they did something she didn't like." Alexander glanced at Sophia, who lowered her head again. He knelt down to his son's eye level. "Ethan, do you like Sophia?" "I like her a lot. She's my best friend." "Why your best friend?" Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "Because she plays with me, listens to me, never rushes me. She believes I'll walk like the other kids one day." Alexander's heart clenched. He asked softly, "And what about me? Am I your friend?" Ethan was silent, then whispered, "You're my dad, not my friend. Dad is important, but a friend is the one who's always there." The answer pierced Alexander's chest like a blade. He turned to Sophia and saw her eyes glistening red. "Ethan, I want to be your friend. Will you let me?" The boy's eyes lit up. "Really, Dad?" "Really. But being friends means playing together, listening to your stories, and watching you practice with Tia Sophia." Ethan leapt with joy, nearly losing his balance. "Then tomorrow, you have to come to the garden and watch." Alexander smiled, a wave of emotions flooding his heart after years of absence. "I'll be there. Tomorrow, I promise." Ethan threw his arms around his father. "Now I have 2 best friends, Dad and Tia Sophia." Alexander hugged his son tightly, his chest brimming with love. He whispered, "Go to bed now, champ. Tomorrow will be a special day." When Ethan had gone upstairs, Alexander turned to Sophia. He spoke just one word. "Thank you." "Thank you for what, sir?" "For caring for my son when I didn't know how." Sophia gave a shy smile. "The boy is very special. Anyone would love him. But not everyone would have the patience or the knowledge to help him make progress, sir." Alexander remained silent for a long while. A storm of thoughts swirled in his mind. Then he told himself, "Tomorrow, I must be there." He knew he had 3 important meetings scheduled in the morning, a video call with American investors at 8 a.m., and a report that needed to be finalized. But suddenly, all of it felt meaningless. "I'll be here in the morning," Alexander said firmly, surprising even himself. That night, when he went to Ethan's room, Alexander found his son fast asleep. The boy had placed his crutches neatly by the bed, as if ready for the day to come. Alexander sat at the edge of the bed, gazing at his son, his heart aching. How long had it been since I last watched him sleep like this? How many moments of his childhood had I missed? He pulled out his phone, canceled all 3 meetings, and sent an email to reschedule the video call. For the first time in his career, he chose family first. The next morning, Alexander woke up at 6:30. He showered, dressed in simple clothes, something he rarely did on a weekday, and headed down to the kitchen. Sophia was already there, preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Sophia," Alexander said, making her startle. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes. You're up unusually early today." "That's right. Is Ethan still asleep?" "Yes, sir. He usually wakes up around 7:30. We start our exercises at 8 after breakfast." Alexander checked his watch. It was only 7:15. He stepped closer. "Is there anything I can help with?" Sophia looked slightly flustered. You want to help prepare breakfast, sir?" "Of course. What does Ethan like on Monday mornings?" "Hotcakes, sir. He says he needs the energy to start the week." Alexander chuckled, shaking his head. "Really? I never knew that." Sophia smiled gently. "He always says so. Besides, it gives him motivation for training." Alexander stood watching her skillfully stir the batter and pour each pancake. Suddenly, he realized she wasn't just cooking, she was preparing a little joy for his son. "Sophia, may I ask you something personal?" "Yes, sir." "Why do you care so much about Ethan?" Sophia paused, then answered softly. "When I was a child, I often saw my younger brother shunned by others because of his weak legs. I still remember the sadness in his eyes when he wanted to play but couldn't keep up. I became his best friend, making up games he could play, encouraging him to try new things, celebrating every tiny step. And it worked. Now Carlos is in high school. He still has limitations, but he never gives up. He lives with strength." Alexander studied her intently. In Sophia's eyes shone deep pride. "And you want the same for Ethan?" "What I want is for him to be happy. I want Ethan to believe he can do anything, because with the loving and complete family he has, he'll go much further than my brother ever could." Alexander's chest tightened with both emotion and shame. He realized that while his son had every material condition, he lacked the most important thing, the care of his own parents. At that moment, Ethan entered the kitchen, his hair tousled, one hand gripping his small crutches. "Dad," he exclaimed in astonishment, "you haven't gone to work?" "Good morning, champ. Today I stayed home to watch you train, remember?" Ethan's eyes lit up. "Really? You'll see how strong I've become?" "Of course. But first let's have breakfast. Sophia made special hotcakes just for you." Ethan cheered, hobbling quickly on his crutches to the table. Throughout breakfast, Alexander quietly observed. His son and Sophia laughed and chatted like old friends, sharing little stories, planning their training. Ethan was so happy he couldn't stop talking, constantly turning to brag to his father. "Dad, did you know? I climbed 3 steps of the stairs without crutches." Alexander's eyes widened. "Really? That's amazing. And I even know some stretching exercises like grown-ups." "Stretching exercises?" "Yes, Tia Sophia taught me. She says muscles have to be ready before practice." Alexander glanced at Sophia. He could see clearly that she knew exactly what she was doing. At precisely 8 o'clock, the 3 of them went out to the garden. Sophia spread a mat over the grass. "Come on, Ethan. Let's start with stretches." Ethan lay down, performing each movement with such precision and seriousness that Alexander was astonished. "Very good. Now we'll work on balance," Sophia said. She helped Ethan to his feet and set the crutches aside. "Try standing for 30 seconds without them. If you succeed, tomorrow we'll try 45. Ethan lifted his chin with determination. "I want to try a whole minute." "Take it slow. 30 seconds is already excellent." Ethan let go of his crutches. Alexander held his breath, watching his son tremble as he tried to stay upright. 15 seconds, Sophia counted, her voice full of encouragement. "See that, Dad?" Ethan called out, his eyes fixed straight ahead. "I see it. You're incredible." 25. 30. As Sophia finished counting, Ethan wobbled and nearly fell, but she caught him in time. "I did it! A full 30 seconds!" Ethan shouted in triumph. Alexander swept his son into his arms, his eyes glistening. "Ethan, I'm so proud of you." The boy beamed, panting with excitement. "Now you understand why I love training with Tia Sophia, right?" "I understand," Alexander whispered. In the days that followed, Alexander began to change. He no longer left the house at dawn, but instead stayed for breakfast with his son and made sure to watch the morning practice in the garden. The more he observed, the more astonished he became at Ethan's steady progress. The boy could stand longer, walk with greater confidence, and above all, the smile had returned to his little face. One afternoon, while Ethan was busy drawing in his room, Alexander invited Sophia into the library. The vast room, lined with bookshelves, no longer carried its usual coldness. Standing by the window, Alexander hesitated for a moment before turning to her. "Sophia?" Alexander's voice faltered before softening in a way she had never heard before. "I owe you more than just gratitude. What you've done for Ethan goes far beyond the duties of a housemaid. You've given my son hope, and you've given it to me as well." Sophia shook her head quickly, flustered. "Mr. Hayes, I only did what my heart told me to. I never expected anything more than seeing Ethan happy." Alexander stepped closer, his expression serious but sincere. "That's exactly why I want to make you a proposal. I want you to become Ethan's official therapeutic companion, not just a maid." Sophia froze, her eyes widening. I don't understand. What do you mean?" "I mean I want you to dedicate all your time to Ethan. The other housework will be handled by someone else. Your sole responsibility will be to accompany him, support him, and continue what you've been doing, but officially with proper recognition and compensation." Sophia fidgeted, her hands twisting together. "But, sir, I don't have a degree. Everything I know comes from helping my younger brother. That's not enough to—" Alexander interrupted gently. "Then I'll sponsor your education. I'll cover the full cost of a formal physical therapy program, tuition, books, everything. Meanwhile, you'll stay here and continue working with Ethan. You'll receive a higher salary, and your family will also be supported." Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes. "Mr. Hayes, why would you do all this for me?" Alexander was silent for a moment, then replied softly. "Not just for you. I'm doing it for Ethan. My son needs you, not only as a friend, but as a source of strength I cannot replace. And for you, I believe you deserve the chance to pursue what you're truly gifted at." Sophia lowered her head as tears rolled down her cheeks. A wave of indescribable emotion flooded her heart. Gratitude, fear, and joy all at once. She thought of her mother working tirelessly and her younger brother struggling to make ends meet. This proposal could change not only her life, but theirs as well. "Mr. Hayes," her voice broke, "I won't let you down. I promise to give my whole heart to Ethan." Alexander nodded, a spark of trust gleaming in his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt a bright future unfolding, not only for Ethan, but for himself as well. News of Ethan's remarkable progress soon spread through high society. Some of Alexander's acquaintances, who had always known him as a cold businessman, obsessed only with profit, began to whisper. They couldn't believe that a powerful billionaire would allow a young maid to have such influence over his son. One evening, at a charity gala hosted by a major corporation, Alexander brought Ethan along. When Sophia appeared, dressed simply in a pale blue dress, several curious and disdainful eyes turned toward her. One guest whispered loudly enough for Sophia to hear, "How strange. Alexander Hayes has everything, yet he lets a servant meddle so deeply in his family." Sophia lowered her head, trying to hide her hurt. Ethan squeezed her hand tightly and whispered, "Don't be sad, Sophia. I know you're the best." Alexander overheard, and his blood boiled. He turned to face the guests, his voice calm but commanding. That woman has accomplished what all the money and the best doctors could not. She made my son believe he could walk again. If you cannot understand the value of that, then perhaps we have nothing more to discuss." The room fell silent. Sophia looked at Alexander, her heart swelling with both gratitude and worry. But the challenges didn't stop there. A few weeks later, Alexander received a call from Marcus Caldwell, a wealthy businessman whose grandson suffered from cerebral palsy. "Alexander," Marcus's voice crackled over the phone, "I've heard your maid is remarkable with special needs children. I want to hire her for my grandson. I'll pay her double what you pay, plus every benefit imaginable." Alexander froze. He answered firmly, "Sophia is not for sale. She's part of my family." But Marcus was not so easily deterred. Just days later, Sophia herself approached Alexander, her eyes clouded with uncertainty. "Mr. Hayes, I received a job offer." Alexander nodded slightly, as if he had expected it. "From Marcus Caldwell?" Sophia hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, they promised to take care of my mother and my younger brother. That amount of money could change my family's life. But I don't know what to do. I don't want to leave Ethan." Alexander studied her for a long moment. In his eyes was both respect and worry. He understood Sophia was torn between her duty to her family and her bond with Ethan. "The most important question," Alexander said softly, "is, what will happen to my son if you leave?" Tears filled Sophia's eyes. "He would be devastated. Ethan trusts me as much as he trusts himself. Just thinking about leaving already breaks my heart." Alexander stepped closer, his voice resolute. "Then I won't let that happen. I'll ensure your mother and brother are cared for. I'll match or surpass their offer. But more importantly, Sophia, I need you to know, to me, you are no longer an employee. You are part of this family." Sophia broke down, her shoulders trembling. "Mr. Hayes, I have only one thing to say. I will stay. For Ethan. For everything." In that moment, Alexander realized his family had faced their first great trial, and thanks to Sophia, they had emerged stronger than ever. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere in the Hayes mansion seemed completely transformed. Every morning, Alexander sat in the garden, patiently watching Ethan's practice. His presence gave the boy new strength. Ethan improved day by day. He could stand longer, and his hesitant steps grew steadier. Sophia was always by his side, patiently catching him when he fell, then encouraging him to try once more. Each time Alexander witnessed it, his throat tightened. He realized it was Sophia's persistence and love that had ignited the fire of determination in his son. Then, on one crisp morning, a miracle happened. "Ethan, today we'll try something new," Sophia said with a smile, her eyes glowing with trust. "You're going to set your crutches aside and try to walk a few steps." Excitement flickered in Ethan's eyes, mixed with fear. He turned to his father. "Dad, do you think I can do it?" Alexander knelt down, taking his small hand. "I know you can, Ethan. I believe in you." The boy's bright blue eyes sparkled. Ethan took a deep breath, then slowly set the crutches aside. Sophia stepped back slightly, her arms ready. Alexander opened his arms wide in front of him. 1, 2, 3 steps. Ethan trembled, but each step echoed like a drumbeat of victory. "I did it!" he shouted, his voice bursting with excitement. Then he stumbled forward into his father's arms, falling but without a trace of tears. Instead, he laughed through the tears streaming down his cheeks. "Dad, I walked! I really walked!" Alexander held his son tightly, his heart overflowing. "My boy, you're incredible. I've never been prouder than I am right now." Sophia stood nearby, tears glistening in her eyes, her hand covering her mouth to stifle her emotion. Ethan turned toward her and shouted, "Sophia, did you see? I walked." She smiled, her voice trembling. "I saw, my little warrior. You truly triumphed." In that moment, Alexander knew his life had changed forever. No business deal, no skyscraper could compare to the joy of watching his son achieve the impossible. And he knew it was all because of Sophia, the woman who had brought a miracle into his family. After the day Ethan took his very first steps, the mansion seemed to come alive with light. The boy grew more energetic than ever, always eager to show his father and Sophia each new accomplishment. And from that day forward, Alexander realized he was changing too. He no longer saw Sophia as just a maid. Every morning, as he sat in the garden watching her patiently guide Ethan, he felt something different: warmth, trust, and a hope he thought he had lost after Amelia's passing. One afternoon, after practice, Ethan hurried clumsily toward his father. "Dad, today I walked 6 steps without my crutches. Sophia says tomorrow I can try even more." Alexander bent down, wrapping his son in a hug. "That's incredible, Ethan. I'm so proud of you." He glanced at Sophia, his eyes meeting her gentle brown gaze. In that moment, both of them knew they had shared something extraordinary together. In the days that followed, the bond among the three grew even stronger. Ethan often called them his dream team. He giggled, "Dad is the superhero, Sophia is the coach, and I'm the little warrior." Alexander and Sophia could only exchange smiles, their hearts warmed by his innocent joy. Sometimes Alexander caught himself watching Sophia as she worked in the kitchen or tended the small garden behind the house. She didn't belong to the glittering world of high society, yet she brought a peace he had never found anywhere else. One evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, Alexander stepped into the garden. Sophia was sitting on a wooden bench, gazing up at the starry sky. He hesitated, then took a seat beside her. "You know," Alexander said softly, "it's been so long since I've seen Ethan smile like this, and it's been just as long since I felt alive again." Sophia turned to him, her eyes shimmering. "Mr. Hayes, that's because of you. He needs his father more than anything. I only played a small part." Alexander shook his head. "No, Sophia? You brought back the light I thought I had lost forever." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. She pressed her lips together, unable to respond, though her pulse raced wildly. In that moment, the two sat in silence, the breeze rustling through the leaves around them. Yet within that silence, an invisible thread began to form. A bond no longer built solely on duty, but on admiration, trust, and a deepening affection neither of them could deny. In the days that followed, Alexander became increasingly aware of his feelings. Every time he saw Sophia patiently guiding Ethan, or heard her gentle laughter echo through the once cold mansion, his heart warmed. It had been so long since Amelia's passing that he had felt this way, alive, cared for, and full of hope. One evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, Alexander asked Sophia to stay in the living room. The soft light cast a glow over her face, her kind brown eyes seeming even brighter in the quiet. "Sophia," he began, his voice lower than usual, "I've been thinking a lot. About Ethan, about this family, and about you." Sophia lifted her head slightly, her heart racing. "Mr. Hayes?" Alexander drew a deep breath, his gaze unwavering with sincerity. "I've lost so much, and I closed my heart for a long time. But then you came, bringing light, bringing back Ethan's laughter, and mine as well. I can't deny it anymore. Somewhere between grief and silence, you brought me back to life. And with that life came feelings for you." Sophia froze. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her heart fluttered with both joy and fear. At last she shook her head, her voice trembling. "Mr. Hayes, that can't be. You're a billionaire, and I'm just an ordinary woman. People will never accept it." Alexander stepped closer, his eyes steady. "I don't care what society thinks. The only things that matter to me are Ethan, this family, and you. Sophia, you're not just part of our lives. You are the heart of it." Tears welled up as Sophia turned away, trying to hide her emotions. I'm afraid if I say yes, the whole world will turn against you." Alexander gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll face it together. I once thought I could fight life's battles alone, but now I know. I don't want to continue this life without you by my side." In that moment, Sophia felt the walls around her heart begin to crumble. She didn't answer, but the tears shimmering in her eyes spoke for her. And Alexander knew they had just crossed into a new chapter where love was born out of loss, resilience, and hope. As time passed, the bond between Alexander and Sophia became undeniable. Though high society whispered, he paid no attention. The only thing that mattered was Ethan, and the boy had never been happier. Every time he saw his father and Sophia laughing together, he would exclaim, "Now I have both my superhero and my coach right here with me." One spring evening, Alexander sat in the garden, the same place where Ethan had taken his first steps. Warm golden lights surrounded them. He held Sophia's hand, his eyes steady. "Sophia, I once thought I'd spend the rest of my life in solitude, knowing only work. But you and Ethan have shown me that the most valuable thing isn't skyscrapers or numbers, it's family. Will you marry me?" Sophia froze, tears flooding her eyes at once. She nodded, unable to form words, squeezing his hand tightly. Alexander smiled, his eyes glistening. "From now on, we'll build a true family together." The wedding day arrived, simple yet filled with warmth. Instead of a lavish ballroom, Alexander chose the garden behind the mansion, the very place where Ethan had once run into his arms for the first time. Guests were only close friends and a few colleagues who respected his decision. Ethan wore a tiny suit, becoming the special best man. With pride, he held Sophia's hand and led her down the flower-strewn path. "Miss Sophia, today I give you to Dad," Ethan said with a radiant grin, his voice bubbling with excitement. The words made Sophia's heart swell so much that she nearly cried. When the vows were spoken, Alexander looked straight into her eyes. "I, Alexander Hayes, promise to love and cherish Sophia, not only as my wife, but as the one who gave me and my son a reason to live, to hope. I vow to place this family above all else." Sophia answered, her voice trembling, "I, Sophia Ramirez, promise to stand by Alexander and Ethan, in joy and in challenge. I'm not here to replace anyone, but to build a home where love is the foundation." As the rings were exchanged, Ethan clapped his hands and shouted, "Now we really are a dream team." Laughter rippled through the garden, mingled with tears of joy. Alexander embraced Sophia and whispered, "At last, we've found our new path." That night, beneath a sky full of stars, the Hayes family began their new chapter. Not just a story of a cold billionaire or a kind-hearted maid, but a story of a family healed by love, bound by trust, and blessed by the miracles that come from the human heart.
"Hey, Blackie, go serve." The words didn't just land, they cracked through the chandelier's glow like glass under pressure. A ripple of laughter followed, sharp and eager, rolling off the polished marble floor of the West Haven Grand Ballroom. Danielle Brooks didn't flinch. She stood near the champagne tower in a simple ivory dress. No sequins, no diamond earrings, no glittering badge of the power she carried. She lifted her phone to her ear, her gaze locked on the woman pointing across the room. Behind that woman, a half-circle of men in tailored tuxedos grinned like it was all sport. One of them actually snapped his fingers at her, as if summoning a waitress. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Danielle. Her voice into the phone was low, deliberate. It's happening. Cancel the $900 million deal. The laughter faltered, not gone, but dented. They hadn't heard the words, only seen the way she said them. Calm, certain, like she wasn't the one cornered, but the one holding the clock. Which catering company are you with? The tall man to the right called out, lifting his champagne flute. If you're fast, we might tip. The woman beside him smirked, leaning in for the kill. Sweetheart, this is for investors only. The ballroom's music didn't stop, but the air shifted. Eyes turned. A photographer hesitated mid-shot. Near the stage, a young reporter slid her phone from her clutch, the camera lens catching the scene over a line of crystal glasses. Danielle's lips curved just enough to register, not enough to comfort. She'd seen this posture before, entitlement dressed as etiquette. At 28, she'd been escorted out of a boardroom she was scheduled to lead, because someone didn't see her name on the list. At 34, she'd been mistaken for her own assistant, while negotiating a global acquisition. The man's voice came again, louder. Security. A uniformed guard glanced up from the entrance, uncertain. The group's matriarch pearl necklace, eyes like steel, plucked the event pass from Danielle's wrist. The rip of paper was loud enough to cut the strings of the quartet in the corner. Get her out. Danielle didn't move. Her phone stayed at her ear. Priority 1, she repeated softly. Across the ballroom, the young reporter's hand tightened around her phone. She didn't know the woman in ivory, but she knew the look in her eyes, the kind that didn't need to yell to be heard, the kind that, in minutes, would flip the entire room. The ballroom's chandelier light seemed colder now, sharper, catching the edges of judgment in every glance. The group in tuxedos hadn't moved, but their voices carried like they owned the air. Which table hired you? The tall man said again, louder this time. His tone wasn't curiosity, it was command. The pearl necklace matriarch added, you're holding up service. People are waiting. Danielle's eyes didn't leave theirs. She shifted her weight, calm, one hand still at her side. The phone in her other hand stayed pressed to her ear. From near the stage, the young reporter Allison Reeves, barely 30, angled her phone higher, the camera lens slipping between two champagne flutes. The red record dot glowed. She wasn't just watching now. She was documenting. A waiter passing by slowed, eyes flicking between Danielle and the cluster of overdressed accusers. He didn't say a word, but his jaw tightened. He kept moving. The pearl necklace woman took a step closer, the heels of her navy pumps clicking against the marble like punctuation. Sweetheart, this event is for investors who actually matter. She glanced over her shoulder at a nearby security guard, a man in his 40s with a silver earpiece. Escort her out, please. The guard hesitated. Danielle caught that hesitation, stored it. At 34, she'd watched a hotel concierge pause just like that before telling her the penthouse was already booked. That pause always came when policy met prejudice and neither side knew which would win. The guard finally walked toward her, slow, cautious. Ma'am, I'll need to see your credentials. M6. They're gone, Danielle said evenly, nodding toward the shredded event pass in pearl, necklace's manicured hand. The reporter's eyebrows rose. She adjusted her phone, capturing the woman holding the torn remains like a trophy. Pearl necklace smirked. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Danielle lowered the phone just enough for her voice to carry. You already chose hard. Then she brought it back to her ear. Move the capital to Harlow. Don't wait for the signing. Jean. A ripple ran through the bystanders' quiet gasps, shifting stances. One man in a gray suit whispered to his wife, Did she just say Harlow? The wife's eyes widened. The tall man in the group scoffed. Is this some stunt? You think we'll fall for a bluff? Danielle's gaze didn't waver. No bluff, just business. Allison, the reporter, stepped forward now, voice careful but clear. For the record, she was invited. I saw her name on the investor list this afternoon. The tall man laughed sharply. You must have read it wrong. I didn't, Allison replied, lifting her phone a little higher, and I'm not the only one who saw it. Somewhere behind the circle, another voice chimed in, a young catering staffer with a tray of sparkling water. She's telling the truth. His words were quiet, but they landed. The pearl necklace woman's smirk faltered, just for a breath. Danielle saw it. Everyone did. She let the silence hold for a moment longer, then said into her phone, "Phase 2 is in motion." The guard froze mid-step. He didn't know what Phase 2 was, but he could feel it wasn't going to favor the people who'd summoned him. The air in the ballroom wasn't just tense anymore, it was heavy, like the first drop in a storm that knew exactly where to fall. Music from the string quartet still floated faintly, but it felt disconnected, like it belonged to another night entirely. The pearl necklace matriarch stepped in closer, her perfume sharp, voice louder now so the nearby tables could hear. "People like you always try to sneak in where you don't belong." Daniela didn't blink. The tall man took his cue, plucking a fresh event pass from his pocket, someone else's, and holding it out mockingly. "Here, maybe this one will match the story you're selling." Then, with deliberate slowness, he tore it in half, letting the pieces drift to the marble floor like confetti. Gasps broke out around them. Allison, the reporter, was already circling to capture the moment, her phone steady despite the adrenaline running through her hands. The matriarch turned to the security guard. "She's stalling for attention. Remove her." The guard moved forward. Danielle held her ground. "On what grounds?" "Fraud," the tall man answered instantly. "She's pretending to be someone she's not, trying to insert herself into a $900 million transaction." That number $900 million hung in the air. Several guests at nearby tables stopped mid-conversation. One of them, a man in a tailored navy suit, leaned to his companion. "That's the size of the Whitmore deal." Danielle's lips tightened, not in anger, but in precision. She lowered her phone just enough to speak into the room. "It was." The matriarch's eyes narrowed. "Was?" Danielle brought the phone back to her ear. "Confirm full withdrawal of capital. Redirect to Harlow Group. Notify both legal teams." Across the room, someone choked on their champagne. The tall man laughed again, but this time it cracked halfway through. "You can't redirect anything. You're no one here." From the back, the young catering staffer spoke up again, louder now. "She's not no one. You don't cancel a $900 million deal unless you own a big part of it." The matriarch whipped around toward him. "Stay out of this, boy." "Too late," Allison cut in, her voice gaining an edge. "You made it everyone's business the moment you tore up her pass." The security guard stopped 2 steps short of Danielle, eyes darting between the accusers and the growing cluster of onlookers. A few phones were raised openly now, red record dots blinking like small, defiant warnings. Danielle's voice stayed low, measured. "One last time, are you certain you want me removed?" The matriarch didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." She nodded at the guard. "Do it." "Oh." He took another step, and that's when Danielle shifted, not backwards, forward, closing the space between herself and the cluster that had been circling her since the first insult. The pearl necklace's posture faltered by a hair, just enough to register in every watching eye. Danielle spoke without raising her voice, but every word carried. "You just told the wrong woman she doesn't belong in the room she paid for." The storm had officially broken. The ballroom wasn't buzzing anymore, it was vibrating. Every glance, every whisper was a current running through the room, feeding something none of them could quite name. Danielle held her phone steady, her eyes never leaving the matriarch. "Proceed to Phase 3, she said into the receiver. On the other end, a crisp female voice, Rebecca, her chief of staff, didn't ask questions. "Understood. Legal is on the line. Capital transfer in progress." The tall man scoffed, a brittle sound now. "Phase 3? What is this, a game?" Danielle's gaze slid to him for the first time. "Not a game. An audit." The words didn't land like a punch, they landed like a filing cabinet dropped from a height, all weight and inevitability. From the side of the room, Allison spoke up again. "If she's bluffing, why do you look nervous?" Her phone was angled deliberately, so that both Danielle and the accusers were in frame. The pearl necklace matriarch shot back. "Because this woman is trying to humiliate my family at a public event." "No," Danielle corrected softly. "I'm just letting your own actions speak louder than I ever could." The security guard shifted uncomfortably. He'd seen enough stunts at high-profile events to recognize when something was unraveling, and this wasn't unraveling in the way the accusers thought. Near the champagne tower, The young catering staffer whispered to another waiter, "She's in control. Look at her, she hasn't moved an inch unless she wanted to." Rebecca's voice returned in Danielle's ear. "Corporate has flagged the Whitmore family's portfolio for breach of good faith in negotiations. Do you want me to loop in Harlow's team now?" Danielle's eyes swept the room. More phones were recording now, some subtly, others defiantly. "Yes," she said. "Make it loud." "Oh," the tall man laughed, but it was hollow. "Even if you had the power, no one cancels a $900 million deal mid-gala. That's not how the world works." "That's exactly how my world works," Danielle said. The matriarch stepped in again, voice sharp. "Do you even know who you're speaking to?" "Yes," Danielle replied, and this time her smile showed just barely. "Do you?" That landed. Not just with them, but with the ring of onlookers who were piecing together the truth. Allison took a small, visible breath. "I think we're all about to find out." The guard hesitated again, caught between the order he'd been given and the feeling that he was about to make a career-ending mistake. Danielle lowered her phone. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge now, like the moment before a verdict is read. "You've called me a fraud. You've torn my credentials. You've tried to remove me from a deal I built, and through all of it, I've been patient." She stepped forward just enough for the space between them to feel smaller, tighter. "Patience is over." Rebecca's voice came through the phone one last time. "All parties notified. Press statement drafted. You're clear to proceed." Danielle looked at the matriarch, the tall man, the pearl necklace glinting under the chandelier. "Good," she said. "Let's end this." The room held its breath. The reveal was coming. The chandelier light seemed to tilt toward her, as if the room itself wanted a better view. Every phone lens followed her now. Even the quartet had slowed, bows hovering above strings, caught in the tension like everyone else. Danielle stepped forward into the open space between her and the Whitmore family. Her heels were steady, each click against the marble sounding like a countdown. "You've spent the last 15 minutes treating me like I wandered in here by mistake," she began. Her voice was calm enough to carry without the microphone, every syllable deliberate. "You've accused me of fraud. You've called security. You've destroyed my credentials in front of 200 witnesses." The tall man folded his arms, trying to smirk. The matriarch's jaw was set, but her fingers tightened around her clutch. "And the entire time," Danielle continued, "you never once asked my name." She paused. That silence was heavy, waiting. Allison, the reporter, caught the exact moment Danielle's gaze sharpened. Phones shifted in unison, the red record lights steady as heartbeats. "I am Danielle Brooks," she said, her voice rising just enough to pierce the edges of the ballroom. "CEO of Brooks Global, architect of the very deal you were celebrating tonight. The $900 million Whitmore acquisition you've been bragging about? I built it, I funded it, and I just gave it to your competitor." The words detonated in the air. The matriarch blinked, lips parting as if to argue but finding no words. The tall man's arms dropped slightly. Gasps swelled from the outer ring of guests. One man near the back clapped once sharp before others joined, scattered but growing. A ripple of applause mixed with low murmurs, a tide turning in real time. "You're bluffing," the tall man managed. Danielle tilted her head. "Check your phone." It was a challenge and a sentence rolled into one. He hesitated, then pulled it from his pocket. His eyes flicked to the screen, color drained. The matriarch did the same, her manicured fingers trembling as she read. Around them, others were reacting to the same push notification. Whitmore Global loses $900 million, deal to Harlow Group, effective immediately. Allison's camera caught the exact moment the matriarch's posture collapsed, pearls glinting as her shoulders dipped. The tall man turned away, but there was nowhere to go. "I didn't need to raise my voice," Danielle said into the sudden quiet. "I didn't need to call the press. You did the work for me. All I did was let you be seen." The security guard took a small step back from her, as if recognizing the line between duty and disaster. From the far end of the ballroom, the catering staffer who'd spoken earlier whispered to a colleague, "She owns the room now." No one argued. The moment the push notification spread through the ballroom, the atmosphere shifted from tension to rupture. Conversations fractured mid-sentence. Glasses were set down too quickly, the crystal ringing like alarm bells. The tall man's face was flushed now, but not with confidence. His jaw worked soundlessly before he muttered to the matriarch, "We can fix this." "No," she snapped under her breath, eyes darting toward the door as if she could walk out of the humiliation. But there was no exit from the lenses already locked on her. Allison's phone didn't waver. She zoomed in, catching the pearls against the matriarch's tightening throat. Across the room, the catering staffer set down his tray and simply folded his arms, a small, defiant smile on his face. The quartet in the corner had stopped playing entirely now, bows resting against their sides, watching the real performance unfold. A man in a navy suit, one of the Whitmore family's own advisors, stepped forward. "Danielle, this isn't necessary. We can renegotiate." Danielle didn't even turn to him. "You had your chance to speak with me when you thought I was a waitress. You wasted it." The security guard, still planted a few feet away, shifted his weight. "Ma'am, my apologies." His voice was quiet, but it carried in the sudden hush. Her eyes softened for just a second, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement before she looked back to the Whitmores. The tall man tried again, desperation cracking his tone. "Look, we didn't." "You did," Danielle cut in, the finality in her voice silencing him. "And now you live with it." From the side, Allison spoke to no one in particular, but her voice was recorded all the same. This is what happens when power walks in quietly. A ripple of agreement passed through the onlookers. Some began clapping again, more steadily now, the sound swelling in the high-ceilinged space. Others simply watched, phones raised, knowing they were catching a moment that would travel far beyond the ballroom. The matriarch tried one last gambit. "We can make this right." Danielle stepped closer, not aggressive, just deliberate. Right would have been recognizing me before I had to announce myself. Right would have been treating a stranger with basic dignity. Now, all you have is the deal you lost. Silence. The catering staffer spoke again, his voice firmer than before. "You don't get to erase someone twice." That line landed hard. Even the guard nodded once, slowly. Danielle straightened her shoulders. "This conversation is over. And so is your claim to my time." Phones kept recording as she turned toward the exit, the murmur of the crowd following her like a tide receding. The Whitmores stood frozen, pearls and tuxedos looking suddenly like costumes from a failed play. And for the first time all night, Danielle was the only one in the room who didn't need to say another word. It started with a vibration. The tall man's phone buzzed twice, a persistent tremor against his palm. He glanced down and blanched 3 missed calls from the Whitmore board chair. The matriarch's clutch began to ring a second later, her ringtone slicing through the air like a reprimand. She didn't answer. From the far side of the room, the Navy suit advisor's phone lit up too. He stepped away, speaking in a low, urgent tone. But even without hearing the words, the message was clear. Damage control had begun, and it was already failing. Allison's camera tracked all of it, the shifting stances, the rapid-fire texts, the small tells of panic. She whispered into her mic, "The family's imploding in real time." Our guests who had been clustered around the Whitmores earlier now drifted away, their polite smiles evaporating. One couple near the champagne tower pivoted mid-conversation and joined the small crowd around Danielle instead, their body language announcing where their loyalties now stood. The pearl necklace matriarch reached for the tall man's arm, her composure fraying. "We need to get to the car," she murmured. "Not yet," he replied through gritted teeth, his eyes darting toward Danielle's retreating figure. But when he looked back, half the investors in the room were avoiding his gaze entirely. The quartet, who had been silent since the reveal, began quietly packing up their instruments, as if the event itself was over. In truth, it was the gala had stopped being a celebration the moment Danielle took the floor. The catering staffer, still stationed nearby, leaned toward another server. "They're radioactive now. No one wants to be seen shaking their hands." He was right. The Whitmore's inner circle had dissolved into scattered pairs, each person hunched over a phone, sending messages that reeked of damage control. One woman, clearly a PR handler, hurried in from the hallway with a tight expression and a tablet in hand. The tall man took one look at the screen she showed him and swore under his breath. Across the ballroom, Danielle's chief of staff, Rebecca, was speaking quietly with a group of high-profile guests, Harlow Group executives. Their posture was relaxed, even friendly. Papers exchanged hands. Smiles returned. The message was unmistakable. The power had shifted, and it wasn't shifting back. The matriarch finally broke, her voice a sharp whisper. "She's just destroyed us in front of everyone." The tall man didn't answer. He was staring at Allison, whose phone was still aimed at them like a spotlight they couldn't escape. Somewhere behind them, another guest muttered just loud enough for the nearest phones to pick up. They brought this on themselves. And then came the sound that cut deepest chairs scraping back as more guests rose to leave. Not just to follow Danielle, but to abandon the Whitmores completely. The ballroom was emptying around them, the space that had been theirs shrinking by the second. The collapse wasn't coming. It was already here. Danielle didn't rush. She didn't need to. Each step toward the exit was measured, deliberate, like she was giving the Whitmores time to feel every ounce of what was happening to them. Rebecca intercepted her halfway, a sleek tablet in hand. "All Harlow contracts are signed," she murmured. "And per your instruction, we've revoked Whitmore's access to the Brooks Global Investor Portal." "Good," Danielle said. "Make sure every vendor and supplier in our network gets the memo before midnight." Rebecca's fingers moved swiftly over the screen. "Drafting now." "You want me to CC their legal?" "Bury them in it," Danielle replied without hesitation. The tall man, still anchored in place across the ballroom, seemed to sense the conversation's weight. His voice cut through the fading chatter. "You can't just lock us out. We have agreements." Danielle turned slightly, enough for her words to carry without crossing the space. "Agreements built on respect. You voided that clause before we even started tonight." Murmurs rippled through the remaining guests. One investor whispered, "She's freezing them out entirely," his tone a mix of awe and caution. Rebecca's tablet pinged. "Done. Vendor notices sent. Our IT confirms their logins have been disabled." "Perfect," Danielle said. "And send the same to the press, worded as a values decision. Make it clear we don't partner with people who humiliate others in public." From her vantage point, Allison caught the moment Rebecca hit send. It was a small tap, but the kind that carries consequences for years. The pearl necklace matriarch's voice finally cracked. "This is vindictive." "No," Danielle said, fully facing her now. "This is responsible leadership. If you think it's harsh, you should consider how it felt to stand here and be told I didn't belong in the deal I built." The matriarch's lips trembled, but she said nothing. A server passed by with a tray of champagne. Danielle stopped him with a gentle hand. "I'll take one," she said, lifting the glass with quiet finality. "And send another to the Harlow table. Tell them congratulations." Across the room, the Harlow executives raised their glasses back in acknowledgement. The symbolism was sharp. The celebration had officially moved camps. Rebecca leaned in one last time. "Do you want me to initiate the portfolio review of Whitmore's holdings?" Danielle's answer was immediate. "Yes. Flag anything tied to our network, then shut it down." The tall man took an involuntary step forward, but stopped short under the weight of every phone still recording. He knew one wrong move now would be replayed online for weeks. Danielle set the champagne flute back on the passing tray untouched. "I don't need to toast to this," she said softly. "It was never a win, it was a correction." With that, she turned toward the exit again. The Whitmores frozen behind her, locked out of more than just a party. The notification hit phones like a wave. One by one, heads bowed over glowing screens, and the ballroom began to hum, not with music, but with the low, electric chatter of breaking news. Allison read it out loud for her livestream audience, voice sharp with the thrill of a scoop. Brooks Global official statement. Partnership with Whitmore Group terminated effective immediately due to breach of values and public misconduct. She glanced at the lens. "That's confirmation, folks. This isn't rumor. It's corporate fact." Across the room, the Harlow executives stood, shaking hands with guests who just minutes ago were orbiting the Whitmores. The migration was obvious. Fortunes, reputations, and attention were flowing toward the new center of gravity. One older investor tapped his friend's shoulder. "Pull whatever you've got tied up with Whitmore before Monday." The friend nodded, already drafting an email to his broker. A PR agent in a navy sheath dress slipped into the corner, phone pressed to her ear. "Cancel tomorrow's press conference. No, don't even reschedule. We're in salvage mode now." Her eyes darted toward the Whitmores. then away as if proximity itself was bad optics. The catering staffer who'd spoken earlier passed by Allison and murmured, "Feels like watching a building collapse in slow motion." She didn't disagree. The cameras weren't just on Danielle anymore, they were swinging to capture the fallout. The Whitmore's cluster shrinking, the advisors scattering, the matriarch's gaze fixed on the floor. Danielle, meanwhile, was in quiet conversation with Rebecca near the exit. No drama, no raised voice, just crisp directives. A few guests approached her cautiously, introducing themselves, offering cards. She accepted some, declined others, but each interaction carried a clear subtext. Alliances were shifting, and she was choosing them carefully. A young journalist from another outlet sidled up to Allison. "Is she always like this? So precise?" Allison kept her lens trained on Danielle. "This is the first time I've seen her in action, and I'm starting to think precision is the whole point." The tall man's phone rang again. He ignored it, shoving it back into his pocket. The matriarch finally looked up, scanning the room as if searching for one sympathetic face. There were none. From the balcony above, a photographer snapped a wide shot of the entire ballroom, the emptying tables on one side, the growing crowd around Danielle on the other. It was the kind of image that would make front pages, not just a moment, but a map of power in motion. By the time Danielle began her final walk to the exit, the Whitmores were already being erased in real time. Their names were trending online not for a record-breaking deal, but for losing it in the most public way possible. The ripple wasn't stopping here. It was just beginning to reach the shore. The conference room at Brooks Global's downtown headquarters was nothing like the West Haven ballroom. No chandeliers, no champagne towers, just glass walls, a long walnut table, and the kind of silence that meant everyone in the room knew exactly why they were there. Danielle sat at the head of the table, flanked by Rebecca on her right and two Harlow Group executives on her left. Across from them, a screen displayed the latest market data. Whitmore Group stock down 14% in the first hour of trading. Harlow's CEO, a silver-haired man named Jonathan Pierce, leaned back in his chair. "You've already gutted their biggest acquisition in a decade. What's next?" Danielle didn't hesitate. "We make sure they can't rebuild off someone else's capital. That means tightening the network." Rebecca slid a document across the table. "This is a list of all shared vendors, partners, and subcontractors between Brooks, Global, Harlow Group, and Whitmore. We've already reached out to 60% of them with alternative contracts. Whitmore is losing supply lines as we speak." Jonathan glanced at the list, then at Danielle. "You're going for a clean break." "I'm going for a permanent one," Danielle said. "If they want to play the long game in our market, they'll have to start from scratch. And by then, they won't have the leverage or the reputation to compete." A younger Harlow exec tapped his tablet. "Press sentiment's still swinging your way. If we move fast, we can frame this as an industry-wide standard. Zero tolerance for public misconduct." "Do it," Danielle said. "And make it loud enough that anyone thinking of siding with Whitmore understands the cost." Rebecca's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and smiled faintly. Investor Coalition just confirmed they're pulling an additional $200 million from Whitmore's remaining projects. Jonathan chuckled. "You've turned them into a cautionary tale overnight." Danielle's expression didn't change. "Good. That's exactly where they belong." For a moment, the room was quiet except for the hum of the city outside. Then Danielle added, "One more thing. I want our legal team to review every pending trademark, patent, or licensing deal in their pipeline. If it aligns with our portfolio, we buy it before they can. And if it doesn't, we tie it up long enough that they can't use it." Jonathan's brow lifted. Aggressive. Danielle met his gaze. Necessary. The plan was brutal, surgical, and entirely within the rules. By the time the meeting ended, Whitmore's options had narrowed to the point of suffocation. As the Harlow team left, Jonathan paused at the door. "You know," he said, "most people would have settled for walking out of that ballroom with the moral victory." Danielle stood, gathering her files. "Moral victories are for people who want applause. I want results." And with that, she turned toward her office, the city skyline waiting beyond the glass, a reminder that in her world, the real power moves always happen after the cameras are off. The city was painted gold by the setting sun, the glass towers catching fire in its light. From the corner office of Brooks Global, Danielle stood with her hands in her pockets. watching the skyline like it was a chessboard she'd already mastered. On her desk, a single envelope lay unopened. The embossed seal of the Whitmore Group was impossible to miss. Rebecca had placed it there an hour ago with a quiet, "It's marked urgent." Danielle didn't reach for it. Instead, she turned slightly toward the wall of windows, her reflection overlaying the city beyond. Power wasn't in the letter they'd sent. It was in the fact she didn't need to open it to know what it said: pleas for reconsideration, half apologies dressed as diplomacy, maybe even an offer to buy back her favor. Behind her, the muted television played a news segment. Clips from the gala, headlines scrolling beneath. Danielle Brooks sets new standard for corporate conduct. $900 million deal collapse sparks industry reckoning. The anchor's voice was crisp. The message is clear: humiliation in the boardroom or the ballroom carries a cost. Danielle took a slow sip from her coffee, the steam rising like a signal into the air. Outside, the city moved on traffic. Lights flickering on, another day folding into night. But for the Whitmores, time had stopped. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jonathan Pierce. Vendor lockout complete. Trademark acquisition underway. They won't recover from this. She typed back 2 words, as planned. For a long moment, she simply stood there, watching the light shift, letting the quiet fill the room. She thought of the torn event pass, the smirk, the call to security. And then she thought of the way the crowd had parted as she walked out, how the applause had grown not because she demanded it, but because they recognized something undeniable. Danielle set her coffee down, finally picking up the Whitmore envelope. She walked it to the paper shredder in the corner, fed it through without breaking eye contact with the skyline. The blades hummed, and the seal split into ribbons. Rebecca stepped in just as the last shred fell. "Press is asking if you'll give a statement tomorrow." Danielle shook her head. The statement's already been made. Outside, the final light of the day caught the tallest building in view, the one with Brooks Global's name etched into its crown. It glowed against the deepening blue, unshakable, unmistakable, and in that moment, Danielle Brooks smiled not for the victory, but for the certainty that she'd never needed to prove she belonged in the room. She'd built the room.